Okay, first of all, good evening, everyone. The subject I'm to address is dealing with global colonialism.
Bye.
And to begin the discussion, I'd like to just, and I'm sure most of you already know what colonialism is, but just for clarity's sake and speaking to the topic, I'd like to offer this as the definition that I believe many scholars do agree upon. Colonialism is the practice of one nation or a group of people establishing control over another through military force and thereby, after seizing control, creating a political, social, economic, and cultural domination of those people who have been subjected to their power for an extended period of time, as well as colonialism includes the murder, rape, imprisonment, and kidnapping of those subjected people. And historically, there are examples of colonialism dating back to ancient civilization, which includes ancient Egypt, when it took control of southern Canaan, Phoenicians, who took over Carthage, along with other territories in the Mediterranean area, ancient Greeks, as well as the Romans, the Arabs, as well as the Vikings. However, for this discussion, some of the most insidious exploitation of people through colonialism began in the 15th century through the 16th century, leading all the way up to the 20th century. And that was led by nations coming out of Europe. And the first wave of colonialism was in the period of what they would call the Age of Discovery, where the Spanish and the Portuguese went into the lands of the Americas, North America, South America, and exploiting the natives of those particular regions, as well as it increased during what was called the Age of Imperialism that really exploited Africa at the highest level, as well as other parts of Asia. And this colonialism was supported by the religious order of the day out of the Catholic Church and the Pope giving his blessings. Along with that, in terms of when you look at colonialism in South America, as well as in North America, but particularly in South America, the leading countries that conquered those lands and implemented colonialism included Spain and Portugal. So most of the Caribbean islands, as well as many parts of Central America, came under the impact of the subjugation by Spain, and in South America and Brazil by Portugal, but along with the European powers of England, France, and the Netherlands. In Asia, because it was global, you had England, the Dutch people, Portuguese, French, Spanish, German, and Belgians implementing that wicked system of colonialism. In Asia, Britain took over and was implementing colonialism in India, Burma, Malaysia, and they created this business entity of the British East Indian Company. The Dutch were very influential and conquered and implemented colonialism in Indonesia, and they created the business entity of the Dutch East Indies. Portugal was also involved in Asia with the land of Malacca and Macca, and they created a lot of trade routes. France took over Indochina, which included Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And in Spain, took over the Philippines. Now in Africa, the Europeans they came together at a historic meeting, which was called the Berlin Conference of 1884. But prior to that, in terms of the rape of Africa, France was one of the leading countries. And it took control. I'm going to just name some of the countries in Africa, modern day countries that it took control of, just for a historical perspective, which included Senegal, which I personally went there and saw in 1980, the remnants of the exploitation. Mauritania, Mali, Guinea, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Benin, Niger, Chad, Gabon, Madagascar, and Congo. I said France impacted at least 14 of the modern day countries, but Britain was just as impactful. And their control and their part of colonialism impacting countries of Africa included Egypt, which I've been there, Sudan, which I've Kenya, Uganda, South Africa, both of which I've been there, Gambia, Sierra Leone, Zimbabwe, which I got an opportunity to meet the president of Zimbabwe, who came under attack because after many years that the English had taken over the land of the people, finally, as an extension of the Lancaster agreements, they were beginning to take back the land, but the United States placed sanctions on Zimbabwe for that particular movement, led by Robert Mugabe. Zambia, Botswana, Nigeria, Ghana, and Malawi. Italy, dirty hands also. Libya, Somalia, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. And as a reminder, during the 40s, remember they had a rebellion there, and Italians committed close to genocide by gassing many of the people there. Spain's role in Africa included Morocco, Equatorial Guinea, and some just little small territories. Portugal, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, Equatorial Guinea, as well as Germany. Germany and Cameroon, Togo, Namibia, Tanzania, Burundi, as well as Rwanda. And I've named all those countries because if you look at the current situation impacting Africa and other parts of the world, colonialism's main purpose was not only to subject the people culturally and as well as they took over the natural resources to build up the civilizations in Europe. So two of the most egregious situations of murder and genocide, I just want to point that out, occurred what we call the Holocaust in the Congo. When we look at the Holocaust under the Germans toward the Jewish people, it really didn't compare to what the Germans, the Belgians did in Congo, killing over 10 million of the Congolese, as well as the same thing under Namibia, where over thousands of people were killed in Namibia. I have more information, but I see the time is out. Did not even get to the United States government involvement in colonialism, because as we know, it has been in many instances across the globe that this government has sanctioned colonialism. So anyway, I would accept some questions during the question and answer period of time. Thank you.
Okay. Good enough. So everything's working. That's really good. I love it when all the technological stuff comes together. Okay. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank Zaki, who has been participating in Black and Green webinars for what, about 20 years now? A long, long time. And we deeply appreciate that. Our next speaker is Michael Berg, who's a member of Jewish Voice for Peace. He is from St. Louis and has lived in China, Bolivia, Paraguay, and South Carolina. Until recently, he worked as the political director of the Missouri Sierra Club. He will talk about Jewish Zionist organizations in St. Louis, concentrating on the campaign to push Cori Bush out of Congress, a new Missouri AIPAC that has begun, the Missouri Alliance Network, and their recent failed campaign to restrict freedom of speech in Missouri schools. Michael Berg.
See if you can take care of the echo, but we're not silent echo. So I would like to start off. Okay. Okay. Is it just going to keep echoing? It's going to be very hard to do this with this echo.
Let me go get Matthew. Just 1 minute. Hold on.
Okay. Yeah, if you could just mute it on this, that probably makes sense. Yeah, just.
Where is it?
I don't know.
Is that the?
Mute. I mean.
It's down on the lower right. You'll see audio. Just hit that and it should have a red mark through it. That'll mute you.
Okay. So
Let me go get
okay.
Matthew.
Before we go, and I do want to address that this gentleman came and gave a pamphlet about the Khazar origins of Jews. I do want to address because he did ask my thoughts in it. I think it's actually very dangerous. I oppose Zionism. I oppose racist structure. And if you don't think, I think that the claim that Jews have ownership of the land because of a claim of DNA or origin there thousands of years ago is nonsense. It doesn't give you a right to do the horrors that people are doing to folks in Gaza and the West Bank. It doesn't give a right for Nakba. And it's irrelevant. And the way to counteract that is not to say, oh, their claims are wrong. Jews really originated somewhere else. I think it doesn't matter. The DNA doesn't matter if we're talking about freedom and rights. So I actually think what that gentleman gave out about the Khazar origins of Jews is very dangerous, and I oppose it. But that's not what I came here to talk about. He did ask my thoughts on that. Is it still? It's echoing, and I can't really talk when it's like this.
You want to use the mic?
Yeah, I mean, I could take it somewhere else. It doesn't really matter. I don't have a. I could go like this. Is it still an echo?
It's still an echo.
Still an echo. Okay. I'm pretty flexible, but I can't talk if it's getting echo now. I think is echo any better now? A little better. Okay, so I'll talk right here. So just want to talk about some of the things that happened. The Zionist Jewish groups in St. Louis who claim to be the Jewish community and are the establishment Jewish community, and what they have been doing in the last couple of years, affecting our political landscape very, very negatively. So first of all, I want to name what these groups are. The main groups, the St. Louis Jewish Federation and its mouthpiece, the St. Louis Jewish Light, which if you read something Jewish Light, it's the viewpoints of the Federation. The Jewish Community Relations Council, the National Council of Jewish Women, the Anti-Defamation League, the American Jewish Committee, the St. Louis Kaplan Feldman Holocaust Museum, and the congregations of rabbis who work within the frameworks of these institutions. They claim to be the Jewish community. We also have wonderful anti-Zionist Jewish groups, Jewish Voice for Peace and Progressive Jews of St. Louis. All these groups that claim to be the Jewish community dismiss our groups as not representing the community and fringe people because we believe in peace, freedom, and equality and an end to the genocide. So want to start with what was done recently, pushing Cori Bush, one of our best members of Congress, out of Congress. It began, with the October 7th Hamas attacks. The Cori Bush condemned the attacks and actually co-sponsored a resolution condemning the attacks, but she also said stop killing Palestinians. And on November 1st, 2023, along with a long list of prominent St. Louis rabbis, including so-called liberal Central Reform Congregation rabbis like Susan Talby, Daniel Bogart, and Randy Fleischer, every single one of the groups I named signed a letter calling Cori Bush anti-Semitic and denouncing her. And this is specifically what they denounced her for doing. They said, she put a statement saying, "We can't be silent about Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign. Babies dead, pregnant women dead, elderly dead, generations of family dead, millions of people in Gaza with nowhere to go being slaughtered. The U.S. must stop funding these atrocities against Palestinians." They claim these specific words were insensitive, incorrect, and fanning the flames of anti-Semitism. This is the reason they gave. And they also made a false claim that she never condemned the attacks, which I pointed was false. So this was part of the beginning of an all-out smear campaign on Cori Bush that got very, very ugly. People probably already know Wesley Bell received $12 million of AIPAC or AIPAC-related money, pro-Israel money. This was opened in other pro-Israel groups. This money was used in a smear campaign against Cori Bush, primarily about her record in Congress relating to her voting record. Because for the general public, the issue of Israel, they're either generally behind Palestinians or also indifferent to this issue, looking at different issues. But within the mainstream Jewish community, there was a smear campaign against Cori Bush specifically on this issue. So this St. Louis Jewish establishment groups, who I've named, got behind the nonpartisan tax-deductible group St. Louis Votes and its primary election offshoot, St. Louis Together. And it was led by Benjamin Singer, who is now, he led the Clean Missouri campaign, is now leading a campaign to stop it, to make it so that ballot initiatives cannot be overridden by the legislature, which is a good thing. But he also took these groups and used them, what should be illegally, for a partisan effort, because it was a nonpartisan, it was supposedly nonpartisan. They brought in the same people who had recently done the smear campaign against former Congressman Jamal Bowman in New York. And they put together a campaign called Anti-Semitism on the Ballot in the Democratic Primary in the 1st District, which successfully worked to increase Jewish turnout only in the 1st District of Missouri and only in the Democratic Party. They would go to synagogues with buses, they knocked on doors in primarily Jewish areas and sent mailers to Jews and people with Jewish sounding names, which is why President of the Board of Aldermen Megan Green got a call from them. She is not Jewish, but they figured, let's just mail to all the Greens or call them. All the places listed on the material for where to get a ballot for early voting were the richest and whitest parts of the district in Frontenac, Clayton, and Maryland Heights. And notice they were called anti-Semitism on the ballots. They did no work in the general election when Trump, who is an on-record anti-Semite, was on the ballot. So they kept continually smearing Cori Bush as anti-Semitic, honestly scaring old folks like this is the second coming of Hitler. And so, this guy who made a career of good governance, pro-democracy campaigns, subverted the spirit of campaign laws by promoting Wesley Bell through a nonprofit. And this was successful. Meanwhile, former state representative Stacey Newman and Rabbi Jeffrey Abraham were the leading Jewish outreach coordinators directly with the Wesley Bell campaign. And I don't know if you heard about it. So since October 7th, 2023, Rabbi Jeffrey Abraham, who's the rabbi of the B'nai Amona congregation, was quoted at least 19 times, probably far more, in the mainstream press, in the Post-Dispatch, in the news channels, in KMOX, the TV news, and he was given deference to speak for the Jewish community. And he multiple times called Cori Bush an anti-Semite. He said that folks like myself are token Jews who represent less than 1% of the community, when actually this Jewish Federation's recent poll showed that 33% of St. Louis Jews feel like they have no connection with Israel and would be fine if it no longer existed, that's way more than 1%. That's not token, that's not majority, but that's a large number. And he called the protests at SLU and Washington University violent, which they were not. He smeared Megan Green, president of the Board of Aldermen, as prejudiced against Jews. So he was given wide range to talk about these things. Now, in January of this year, he went on social media and he said that there were no innocent civilians in Gaza. He said that all Palestinians everywhere need to be re-educated. And he agreed with the statement that all people in Gaza were animals, full stop. Now, think about if an imam in this community who had been quoted over and over and over and over by the press had said the same thing about Jews, that they all need to be re-educated, that they're animals, full stop. there would correctly be an outcry from these mainstream Jewish organizations that the community needs to renounce this and some sort of sanctions or some sort of apologies from this rabbi. This happened in January. Since this time, St. Louis Jewish Voice for Peace, the Islamic Foundation of Greater St. Louis, and Progressive Jews of St. Louis have all been pushing establishment Jewish groups or any rabbi to make a statement condemning Abraham's words. Nothing has happened. There's been no sanctions. Okay, there's a lot to go through here. So you have, I did not get to what I want. So Stacey Abraham, the other leader in the Jewish Outreach Organization, started the Missouri Alliance Network. Abraham was the chair of that group, and then he just disappeared. He was the founding chair, and when they were under pressure for his words, on the website he was no longer the founding chair, which is very dishonest because you can change your chair, but you really can't change your founding chair. This organization has an avowed goal to be the AIPAC for Missouri. So they said they're going to, like the Christian right does in school board races, they're going to play in school board races, in aldermanic races, in state house races, and state senate races, and making sure that even at this level, places that do not make foreign policy decisions, that there will be nobody who speaks out for Palestinian rights who are in these positions. And she is a former state representative, called herself liberal, although she wrote an op-ed in Jewish Life recently that said since October 7th, she was no longer a progressive liberal activist. She is just a Jew. So they had actually endorsed Kara Spencer. That's the first person they ever endorsed. They endorsed Kara Spencer for mayor of St. Louis. And people talked to Kara Spencer and explained the words of Rabbi Abraham. And to her credit, Kara Spencer renounced the endorsement and did not accept the endorsement. But they are trying to play in these elections. They're raising money. My time is up. I just want to know the other thing they've been doing is these organizations, every single one of these established groups, have been pushing to pass a bill to put the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism as the official definitions for all public schools, both higher education and K through 12. This definition of anti-Semitism is extraordinarily dangerous. It would say if you compare what the state of Israel is doing to Nazis, which is at this point in time a correct comparison. I think a few years ago, it probably would be extreme. At this point in time, it's not extreme at all with the horrors they're inflicting on Gaza. You'd be called anti-Semitic. You had a soldier in Israel saying, hey, what we're doing is like the Nazis. You quote the soldiers, would you be called anti-Semitic? If you say Israel's intrinsically a racist state, and that it was born a racist state, and shouldn't exist because of its race and should be changed to something fundamentally different, which is true, which is accurate, which is what good people should be promoting, you'd be called anti-Semitic. It bans the double standards, which I guess if you don't renounce any crimes of any state, you can't renounce what Israel does. So every single one of the organizations I know, I named here, were pushing that. The Missouri Alliance Network was pushing that. We had a group of people fighting back against that, and we stopped it. And one last thing, the Missouri Holocaust, the St. Louis Holocaust Museum, it's an excellent museum, what it does, but its primary mission is to promote the Zionist view of Judaism. It goes every time it will not make a statement against Jeffrey Abraham. We beg them, we ask them to make the statement, even though his words could be taken straight out of the museum as an example of dehumanization of an entire people and race. They will say nothing. But every time a teenager sprays a swastika anywhere, I'm not pro spraying swastikas, but a swastika on a building in Afton is not as serious as a genocide in Gaza, which they have said not a word about any time. There was a swastika in an empty building in O'Fallon. They're making a big deal out of that. Okay, there's an actual genocide going on in the name of the Jewish people, and you are the Holocaust Museum, and you say nothing. And you actually have people at your museum who are denying it. It's grotesque, and just because the museum has good aspects to it, it is part of the same establishment of groups. They are very dangerous, just like all these other organizations. So I've gone past my time, but I thought this was information people need to know.
Thank you very much, Michael. I have a couple of comments that I want to make about what Michael said. First of all, I want to make, in case you did not know, the Green Party had a candidate against Wesley Bell who focused most of the campaign in the November 24 election on Zionism and opposing Wesley Bell's capitulation. And I was a candidate and devoted an enormous amount of time to getting the word out about Zionist racism. The other thing that I want to do, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight and say, however you heard about this program, it was not on Instagram, because just within the last 24 hours, Instagram took away the posting privileges of the Green Party of St. Louis. Now, why did that happen? Was it because Zuckerberg has a computer software that looks at using ethnic cleansing in the word Palestine and takes that down? Is it because Zionists saw the listing of the posting and several complained? Or is it just because AI is a bunch of crap and nobody should ever have faith in computer generated software? I don't know. There's no way for us to know, but it is a coincidence, and it is consistent with the sorts of things that Michael Berg has been saying. Okay, a third speaker is Steve Tamari, who is active with the St. Louis Palestine Solidarity Committee. He is Emeritus Professor of Middle East and Islamic History at Southern University Edwardsville. And Steve will discuss the historic significance of current Israeli wars in Gaza and the West Bank with a focus on the Southern Hebron Hills. Steve.
Hi. Is the mic for the people on Zoom call? Is that how they get it? They're here. Do I need to use the mic? Probably, okay. If I stand here, is that good enough?
Yeah.
Is that good, Matt? If I speak up, will that be good? Okay, so I want to thank my other speakers. Mr. Baruti in particular mentioned colonialism, and that's a big part of what I want to talk about today. And then, of course, Michael set the stage for the local context. So briefly, I have a big job to do here. Palestine 101. I'm going to talk about the Palestine and the Palestinians, the historical geography of Palestine, the 100 Years' War on Palestine, the Oslo Accords, and just set the stage for tonight's main course on the South Hebron Hills and the current ethnic cleansing going on there. So, can I get the second slide? So really quickly, Palestine has always existed. I mean, it's a place that's defined by natural borders, with the Lebanese mountains to the north, the Jordan River to the east, the Mediterranean to the west, and of course the Syrian desert, and then the Arabian desert to the south. It's been controlled by many different empires, colonial forces, and these are just some random maps, basically, making the case that Palestine is a place. I mean, we have to do that sometimes. Okay. How about Palestinians? Who are the Palestinians? That's what Palestine is. Who are the Palestinians? The Palestinians, that should be the next slide. The Palestinians are simply the Palestinians are simply the people of the land, the indigenous people of the land. They are, if you will, the native people of America, right? To North and South America, but for the region of Palestine. These Palestinians are not defined by ethnicity or by language necessarily or by religion. Their composition over the millennia has changed. They may have been majority Jewish at some point. They were majority Christian at some point. They include Armenians. They are simply the people of the land. I don't know that everybody understands that, but it helps explain, slide number 3. It helps explain, okay. Is there another slide? War on Palestine? Maybe I missed a slide. No, going back. Okay. Okay, so here's a big point I want to make. I made it in the introductory slide. And it relates to colonialism, which has come up earlier. So the situation in Palestine is not a conflict between two groups. I think that's a very well entrenched view of the situation. In fact, the situation in Palestine is one of colonial conquest, right? And it began with the British. The British controlled this region after the First World War from 1920 until 1948. They had been interested in this land. Before that, they had sent geographic surveys, the Palestine Exploration Fund, they surveyed the area. I mean, there's a long history of the British being interested in control over this land. It serves religious purposes, it has religious significance for the British, it had strategic influence near the Suez Canal as a part of their global empire. What happened in Palestine basically was a matter of conquest, right? A war on Palestine. The Zionist movement was adopted by the British, right? Who declared in 1917 that they supported the creation of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And that claim, that purpose was integrated into the mandate for the colonial control of Palestine after World War I. The League of Nations gave Britain the mandate for Palestine, and it included provisions for the creation of, at that point, a Jewish homeland. But the Zionist movement was really interested, especially the colonial Zionist movement, if you will, was really interested in a state. And by 1948, after 28 years of British rule, there was already a proto-state in place with militias, a variety of militias, with a council that reported to the British, with industry, labor unions. And so when it came to, when the British decided to leave, right? And the Jewish population was growing dramatically after the Holocaust. Tensions were rising. There was basically, a kind of war developing. The British had to deal with this. They couldn't deal with it. They turned it over to the UN and they left. And the better equipped, more prepared Zionist forces took over roughly 80% of historic Palestine. And 80% of the people who lived in what became Israel in 1948 were pushed out. All right, that's the whole thing in a nutshell. I hope it makes sense. But I really think it's important to see this not as a conflict between two people over the same piece of land, which is what it's often described as. It's actually a process of colonial rule that continues to this day, right? It's ongoing colonial rule, ongoing settler colonialism, ongoing war on Palestine. Now, okay, I think now we can go forward with that. Okay, so yeah, this is really just to show you the map, and that thing, there's something in the way there.
Yeah, right. You need to X out this. Yeah.
All right. So in terms of the chronology, some important dates, 1948, when, as I said, 80% of the Palestinians who were part of what became, who lived in what became Israel were thrown out. Many of them ended up in two other parts of historic Palestine, Mandate Palestine, the West Bank and Gaza. Everybody familiar with this map? Okay, so the West Bank was occupied, and Gaza were occupied in 1967. And we see the same process of colonial takeover, of taking over of land, of expelling Palestinians, of destroying Palestinian homes. We call it the continuing Nakba. So we're zeroing in on the last and chief presentation tonight, which is focused on the West Bank. So then I have another picture. So let me say, okay, so 1948, 1967, and zeroing in on basically the Jordan Valley, the southern Jordan Valley, and what's known as the South Hebron Hills. This area was actually always of interest for the Zionist movement, just like all the land is, right? But it had some qualities. There were Jewish settlements here. They go back, I mean, not settlements in the modern sense, but there were Jewish communities who had lived in this part of Palestine for centuries, maybe millennia. Hebron, which is close by, was a destination for Jewish pilgrims from around the world. And then it's the Jordan Valley, close to Jordan. It had there are many different reasons why the Zionists and the Zionist state of Israel were interested in. In 1993, and then really in 1993, the PLO, which had been the representative of the Palestinian people for a long time, basically surrendered to Zionism and US imperialism and squandered away the land, basically what was left of Palestine. According to a 1995 Oslo II Accord, the West Bank was divided into 3 areas. Area A was going to be administered by the Palestinian Authority, which is what the PLO became. It really has become basically the arm of, okay, I've got to stop now, the arm of Israel and the United States. I mean, that's where much of its funding comes from. It's limited authority. I mean, Israel can intervene, and it does when it likes. Area B was somehow shared control between the Palestinian Authority and, they run the schools and they do some of the administration, shared security control, of course, with Israel dominating. And then Area C, the largest part, administered by Israel and includes the South Hebron Hills. And so over the years, since 1993, even before that, this area has suffered very intensive efforts to depopulate it of Palestinians. And I guess let me say one thing about Area A, though. Area A, where Palestinian Authority has, some kind of nominal control, is 3.6% of historic Palestine. All right, I think that's, I got a picture here. Yeah, there's one more slide. This is a picture of what Area A, Area B, Area C look like in the West Bank. The darkest ones are Area A, Palestinian control, or Palestinian Authority administration, maybe. The lighter ones are Israeli and joint. And then the orange is Israeli control. Which is 60% of it. And then I tried to cut out a little of the bottom there, and you could see where I don't know if you could see, yeah. So Masafer Yatta is down in the south. If you see Hebron up there, the little town, right, where the little circle is, and Yatta is another town, and Masafer Yatta, you can explain what that is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, thank you very much. That's a lot of really good information. Okay, so we're going to hear from Bob Suberi, who has been working with the Greens for a long time. Bob is with the Green Party of St. Louis, Center for Jewish Nonviolence and Veterans for Peace. He returned from Masafer Yatta a few weeks ago, and he's going to describe his experience documenting settler and colonial and institutional violence over the past 5 years, and especially since October the 7th. We'll also go into the wider context of Palestinian displacement and disenfranchisement. Okay, Bob Suberi.
Okay. Yeah, excuse me 1 second. Okay, that's great. Yeah, my name is Bob Suberi. I just returned from Masafer Yatta. I spent 3 months there this year. I've been going there since 2019. I attended a 10-day seminar there. And then I went through the Center for Jewish Nonviolence, which is an organization providing protective presence. They've since branched out and are doing other things in South Hebron Hills. I went with the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. I signed up for another organization first, Eyewitness Palestine, which is a great organization. But the Center for Jewish Nonviolence centers their delegations around an action, and that intrigued me. Also, the fact that they're Jews like myself, who have, kind of come around. Many of them were Zionists. I refer to myself as a recovering Zionist. A little bit about where I'm coming from. My parents are Yemeni. My mother was actually born in Palestine. Her family immigrated before. My father immigrated from Yemen in 1919. So he was 5 years old. He spent most of his life in Palestine. So there were Palestinian Jews, as Steve was saying. The ethnic variety of people living in Palestine was quite varied. My siblings and I grew up in the Jewish Zionist tradition. We went to Zionist summer camp. We loved it. I used to look forward to it every summer. It provided us with this kind of special identity of we were different.
Excuse me, would you please somebody raise the mic for him? He has to bend over.
Oh, it doesn't go any higher, so I guess I can take it out. Look at that. Anyway, thank you. Yeah, anyway, the identity associated with Zionism is, it's racist. I didn't recognize it at the time. We felt special. We felt like we were persecuted, because of the history of the Holocaust and all that. And we're going to show the world we were okay. I'm talking about Zionism, not Judaism. The ideological indoctrination. Hold on 1 second. Could you hand me my mouse? Anyways, the ideological indoctrination that I grew up with was hardwired, and it was very difficult to break. It wasn't until, like I said, it wasn't until 2006 that I went on a delegation with, I worked on an army base. It was right after it was 2006. It was right after the Hezbollah war, and I was going to do my part for my country. I saw things there that didn't quite jive with the way I grew up. I started asking questions. That my family in Israel could not answer. I still have a large family in Israel. As far as the map goes, see if The area that I lived in is called Umalhair. I mean, the village that I lived in, but we provided protective presence for Umalhair, Twani, Twani and Rakiz, which I'll talk about is the very small village right next to Twani, and Susia, the three main villages, although there are many other small villages that we also went to and provided protective presence for and did other things for them as well. This yellow area is kind of important. It's called the firing zone. Israel uses many different techniques to acquire land, incorporate land that is Palestine into Israel. The firing zone was declared an army training area by Ariel Sharon, and they told all the residents they had to leave. Big court battle lasted 20 years, and then another 20 years. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago in May, I think it was 2023 in May, that they decided, yep, it's a firing zone. All the villages have to leave. There were originally 12 villages there. There are 8 now. I don't have enough time to go into that in detail, but there are villages there that we used to go to that are very difficult to get to now. One we'll talk about called Jimba. The first week I arrived in Umalhair, the village I lived in, the surrounding settlement of Carmel. Now you have to understand, Umalhair was there, Carmel developed around Umalhair. In 2021, when I was living there for the first time for 3 months, it was surrounded on 3 sides. Now it's surrounded on 4 sides. And the first week I was there, the settlers figured out another way that they incorporate land is through farming or through national parks or through religious holy sites. So they used the excuse of the religious holiday of Tu B'Shvat, which is an environmental holiday where you plant trees. They planted olive trees on Palestinian land. Umalhair, which was, I told you, surrounded on 3 sides, now surrounded on 4. The raising of the Israeli flag here, which I'll show you in a minute, kind of Iwo Jima style, symbolizes so much with regard to Zionist ideology and their self-image, that they're conquering this land, not stealing it. In fact, they're stealing it. This marked a new stage in the settlement's incursions on Palestinian land. The Palestinians are just gathered around, just observing. They couldn't come close. The army was here protecting the settlers. Okay, this year's visit coincided with Ramadan. During Ramadan, Muslims fast all day long. They break their fast with what's called the iftar dinner, and that's a time when they're hungry for one thing, but they sit back. It's usually done in a community setting with their friends and family. It's a very community-oriented time. On the first night of Ramadan, during the iftar dinner, settlers made their presence felt. In Umalhair, about 50 settlers staged a training exercise. They were all decked out in army uniforms. They're not in the army, but they're decked out in army uniforms. They were given army uniforms when Ben-Gvir gave them M16s. Of course, the villagers, not knowing what would follow, ended their dinner to be ready for whatever might follow. I was
You gotta
there.
stay and
for
listen.
dinner with
Know what it's
someone.
about.
It's experience.
In the village of Susia,
Are you gonna watch it?
they had a rather more violent attack by settlers from a nearby settlement. Settlers attacked cars, they threw stones, they had clubs, they attacked the homes, and they attacked the villagers. Some were injured. Yelling Ramadan Kareem, which is the traditional greeting that Palestinians greet each other with during the time
Okay.
of Ramadan.
Increase the volume
Hamdan Bilal, I don't know if you remember his name, but
on this? No.
but he was one of the directors of the film No Other Land. He was also one of the subjects in the film, was injured while he was protecting
I
his
did
home.
this. Okay,
Uh,
here we go.
he would, you know, settlers came up and hit him with clubs and rocks. He never hit back, but he stood there and protected his property. He was arrested, promptly arrested. He never never got any medical attention. He was bleeding in the head and in his stomach. And let me show you this slide. We were called, I didn't go, but some of the other younger settlers, activists went to Susia to try to, stand between, what we usually try to do is stand between the settlers and the Palestinians. Listen.
Can we go back to the car?
It's the settlers and their dogs.
Listen to the stones hitting the car.
I don't hear them.
You see the windshield.
What happened to it? They're not hearing anymore.
That's a brave group of youngsters. They're youngsters, their 20s and 30s. In Khair, immediately after the establishment of the settler olive grove, incursions inside the village began with regularity. Righteously dressed in religious apparel, this family, this couple with children and dogs, strolls through the center of the village, through the community center basketball court. You can hear one of the activists who was living there asking them what they're doing and telling them that this is not okay. As you can see in the video, they just ignored her. Oops.
We can't see the slides.
That's my. Let me go back here. And it's not all right. What are you doing with it? They're making their presence felt, claiming what they claim to be their land.
So were those yelling are Israeli Jews?
That was in Israel, actually, she was an American girl who speaks Hebrew. And she saw them there. She was the only one standing there at the time. She flipped out her phone, asked them what they were doing, told them it wasn't okay. I called her earlier to ask if it was okay to use that slang. as you can see, this is another party walking through the center of the village, brandishing their firearms with their children and also wearing religious, paraphernalia on their head. They're wearing the yarmulke, and the young guy all the way on the left, you can see what's called tzitzit, or the tallis, wrapped around his waist, which is a prayer shawl. We've seen this kind of threatening arrogance happening over the years, but since October 7th, it's happening at such a frequency and with such impunity inside the villages that I wonder each time I leave if I will see some of these villages again. Palestinian villages, the Palestinians in the village erected a fence to prevent these incursions and reduce the accompanied disruptions within the village. I'll talk more on that in a moment. The day before I left,
You have
so
to download.
you shouldn't have to. First week in May.
You don't
That
give
was
me the computer.
inside the village. Now, prior to this, they used to take their sheep and let them graze on Palestinian crops.
Really?
Inside the village here. The army was protecting the settlers as Palestinians and activists tried to block them from entering. The Palestinian being pushed, you'll see in the video, and threatened by the soldier was subsequently arrested and charged 1,000 shekels to be, in order to be released.
Ransom.
About 3.5 shekels to $1. Settlers were not even questioned.
Mic on, do you?
What do you mean my mic on?
Okay, so back to the fence. One morning when the village awoke, it was discovered that settlers had torn down the fence in the night and cut the olive trees that the villagers had planted behind the fence. The villagers re-erected the fence immediately. The Israeli Civil Administration was called, and they verified Palestinian ownership of the property. But as expected, the army will not lift a finger to enforce even Israeli laws. The following day, settlers came again to attack the fence. This time they came in force. There were about 30 of them in broad daylight. And as you can see, under the protection of the army, during which a woman's hand was broken, this guy is just cutting the fence, cutting right through it. They're just standing there. Notice the masks on these soldiers' face. This is a new thing. We didn't start seeing this until I'd never seen it until this year. Reminds me of the ICE agents that are arresting immigrants. This is an ongoing battle in Hair, and since October 7th, villagers bravely protect their boundaries while settlers are relentlessly invading, provoking, and attacking people and their property, while the army just looks on. This is another midnight harassment. The settlers driving through the center of the village, blaring his horn in the middle of the night. The road in the background goes to the city of Yatta. Yatta is frequented by all the villagers in Masafer Yatta for shopping. They work there. They also get their health care there. A family was passing through this makeshift gate when the army stopped them, made them position their car blocking the road, and took away their keys. This was in the morning. The family was stranded all day. We activists, were called to bring them food and water. While we were there, we stopped every passing police car and army vehicle, asking where were the keys? And we wanted to know why the family was being detained. We received no answers, but the keys were returned in the evening. So they spent the whole day there. And they used the Palestinian card to block access, instead of blocking it with concrete barriers. Okay, the village of Akiz, which I pointed out, is next to Tawani. There's a sheikh there by the name of Saeed. He's well known there. He's been there for some time, and he's helped a lot of the villagers building houses, fences, whatever. Settlers came to his property and brought a bunch of equipment to build a fence. Saeed's son, who's 14 years old, came upon all the equipment there on the property and started moving it off the property. He knew what it was. A settler came, started beating him up, knocked him to the ground, and the sheikh came over to tend to his son, who was bleeding and hurt. At that point, the settler started beating the father, knocked him down, and then shot him with an M16 in the leg. An ambulance was called, but by the time it arrived, the army appeared and prevented the Palestinian EMTs from tending to the sheikh's wounds. Consequently, he lost his leg. The settler was never even questioned, let alone arrested, and in fact, he showed up the next day on the sheikh's property to continue the work. The son, however, was arrested. This is the sheikh in the hospital. This is in the town of Beersheba in Israel at Soroka Hospital, where I and an Israeli friend went to see him. As you can see, he's handcuffed to the bed, and he's guarded by 2 soldiers. Mind you, they're not there to protect him. The next night, they amputated his leg above the knee. His lower leg could not be saved again because of the delay in getting medical attention to him. He and his son were fined 5,000 shekels apiece in order to return home.
What were they fined?
Sorry?
Why were they fined? What was?
They were fined for being victims. They're Palestinians. If they didn't find them, if they didn't accuse them of something, well, they'd have to look at the settler and so this happens all the time. The village of Timbo, which was in that valley, in the firing zone in that yellow area, lies at the very southern tip of the West Bank. It is an extremely old village with buildings dating back thousands of years. Many have been destroyed by Israel previously to hide any evidence of previous civilizations. The village was attacked on the 28th and the 29th of March. Settlers and Israeli forces stormed and attacked the community. 5 Palestinians were hospitalized, 2 in intensive care, including a child. This received very little attention in spite of the fact that it was one of the most violent attacks in the area in years. The following day, the army returned under the pretext of searching for weapons. They invaded homes, destroyed furniture, doors and windows. They ripped up the women's clothes with scissors and dumped their food onto the floor, mixing milk, flour, labneh, which is goat yogurt, cheese, and whatever they found. Again, this was during Ramadan, so they had nothing to eat for their iftar dinner. Again, 22 Palestinians were arrested. 7 were incarcerated for weeks. And the victims had to pay 35,000 shekels to be released. Sorry, I want to show you this. This is one house, just one house. And you can see the food lying around, the flour, the milk right here. I mean, it's just a total disaster. This is what the village of Khalit Adava looked like when I arrived in country. It was often described as one of the most picturesque villages in the area because of its location above the desert valley below. That valley is where the firing zone is. Also, the firing zone includes Khalit Adava. This is what it looks like today. On May 5th, one month ago, the village was leveled by the Israeli Civil Administration. 90% of the buildings were demolished, including caves. Settlers erected tents and invaded caves and are now today beating the villagers that are trying to return to live in the rubble. Again, villagers in that village have been arrested and they're having to pay fines. I often comment on Palestine being the ugliest and most beautiful place at the same time. The perseverance and optimism of Palestinians I met in Masafer Yatta and elsewhere in the West Bank is hard to believe. Their communities are supportive of one another and their hospitality is second to none. Their children, in spite of what their community cannot shield them from, are beautiful and playful. Every year during the summer, when the children are not in school, Masafer Yatta provides a summer camp for the kids. I got to attend some of their events last year. It's a beautiful thing to see the joy on the faces of children and the attending adults. Their moments of peace are relished with exultation. Burin is a village just south of Nablus, up in the north. It's not in Masafer Yatta. The Kite Festival in the village of Burin is another example of how Palestinians refuse to relinquish their capacity for joy. Burin has held the Kite Festival almost every year since 2008. Burin is surrounded on all sides by violent settler outposts. Living in this reality has meant years of settler state harassment, land expropriation, burning of crops, which we saw, by the way, and general disruption of livelihood. The Kite Festival is saying we have the right to smile, we have the right to joy, we have the right to have fun, we have the right to be happy, we have the right to play, and we have the right to move. From the Burin Mountains to the sands of Gaza, we will not kill our hopes and our smiles. This was really a festive occasion. That night, settlers burnt about 1,000 olive trees belonging to Palestinians. But there were a lot of activists there, so there was no violence during the festival. We're going to be doing our own festival, kite festival here in St. Louis. Be on July 6th, and we'll be sending out flyers and announcements for it. Anyway, thank you all for your patience.
You know if there's any comments or questions in the chat?
Yes, we do.
Okay, that was very amazing. I'm really looking forward to the finding out about the Kite Festival on July the 6th. Bob, do you have any information about how this has affected the population of West Bank? How many, I know the Palestinians are doing their best to stay and not be driven out. Do you have any idea how many are staying, how many being driven out?
There have been a couple villages that have left. The village of Zanuta left on their own because of harassment from settlers, and there have been a couple others that have left. There have been villages that have just been, demolished, like Khalat Adaba. And they're persevering. I just can't see. I can't, because of the violence, and the settlers actually set up an outpost there. I just can't see them staying. It's tragic. Khair is a Bedouin community. They have no other homes. A lot of the fellaheen, which are the farmers, use Area C for farming, but they have homes in the cities, like in Yatta or in Hebron. Not so with Khair. So I mean, they're hanging on to their property with their teeth.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I would ask for people to keep their comments to 2 or 3 minutes. Barbara?
Yeah, Bob, where do they go? Those people don't leave.
And the question is, where did the people go who left?
Many of them will go into the cities. I mean, and it's creating a problem in Yatta and Hebron because they're becoming overcrowded, and there are no, there are no facilities for them, so they have to live with family.
This is a question from the chat. It's, in your opinion, is there any solution to the settler violence problem?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is there any solution to the settler violence problem?
Yeah, get the settlers out of there. It's not their land. That's the solution, but that's not going to happen, obviously. There is another solution. Join me. Be an activist. Go down there. You'll love these people, and it doesn't have to be a dangerous kind of situation that you're in. You can expose yourself to as much, what should I say, physical challenge as you want. But they really benefit and they really appreciate the solidarity with activists being there. And it does in fact diminish severe violence amongst Palestinians.
Anything? Oh, yeah. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say,
Hey, why don't you take the mic, because I think the people who are on the Zoom would be better able to hear if they could, through using the mic.
yeah, I think so we're living in the shadow of genocide. And I think it's hard to, I think it's really important to know about what's going on in the West Bank and in places like Masafer Yatta. And this is not new, actually. Much of the Israeli Zionist occupation and takeover of the land unfolds in this way, day to day, right? Like, I think it's brilliant that you see the car parked, across the road to the nearby town, right? That's just, and that happens every day, something like that. Or attacking those people for, moving the tools from one place to another, or it's just the grinding, and this has been going on since the occupation started. The grinding conditions, everyday conditions of the West, especially in the West Bank right now. And the same thing was going on in Gaza before. But I think it's a really important lesson to take away, is that it's not, genocide is pretty bad, right? We've reached a new level of violence, but this kind of everyday violence, I think, is really central to how Palestinians have lost, their land.
No, sure.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I'd also like to add to that. They're setting the West Bank up to be treated just like Gaza.
Yep.
Right now. It is the civil administration's intention to make life unbearable in the West Bank and to force them into crowded urban areas, like I mentioned earlier. And there they can be controlled. They've already got walls around the cities. It wouldn't take much. They've closed off all the entrances, like to Hebron. Hebron's the biggest city in the West Bank. It's huge. They have 2 entrance and exits that are opened and closed. They have checkpoints there, and you never know when they're going to be open. You can't run a business that way. You can't run your life that way. It took us 2 hours one time to get out of Hebron. It's just insane. So they have the apparatus already set up to close and wall off these cities. So they become open air prisons, just like Gaza.
Just, Bob, is it correct that is based, doing that, walling off cities is based on the idea that all Palestinians are terrorists? And it's a reasonable thing to do because Israel has to do that to protect itself from everybody who's a terrorist.
Yeah, I don't think they need excuses. They have the power to do it, and they don't give excuses. Basically, if you question, and we do this all the time, as privileged international activists, we can argue with the soldiers and with the police. Why are you doing this? Why are you wearing that mask? I thought you should be proud of what you're doing. Why are you taking that guy's car keys? They don't even give you an answer. They don't bother to give you an answer because they don't have to. They have all the power.
Tom, why don't you come on up, and if you speak into the mic, then people on the Zoom can hear you better. Go ahead.
Yeah, you better. Hi, my name is Tom. I'd like to thank the Missouri Green Party for doing this. And if there's any Democratic Socialists, or I was hoping to see Cory Bush here, but that might be too much asked. But if there's any Democratic Socialists, and thanks for being here. And then thanks to the Green Party for doing this. I want to say I believe that a lot of this would be a lot better if the United States was not financing it. And whether I'm right or wrong, we shouldn't be paying for it anyway.
You're right.
Yeah, and I think, well, just to remind you that some of the big reasons why this is happening goes back to everything I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We had someone in Congress representing us who was standing up against this and said, let's not fund these kind of abuses, and was recognized the kind of horrors that Bob was talking about, and saying, we need to change this because apartheid is wrong, racism is wrong, genocide is wrong. And you had AIPAC, going against it, and the Christian Zionism is a big part of it, but you have these Jewish Zionist groups also going full in. And you look at the Cori Bush's election, I believe Jews represent 3% of the people in the district, but they were able to get these organizations were able to get the Jewish vote as about 9% of the election vote. And that actually made the difference. And I didn't really have a lot of time to mention it before, but this whole anti-Semitism is on the ballot. Part of the campaign was to push groups of Orthodox Jews who traditionally vote Republican to take a Democratic ballot, which is not in the spirit of how the Democratic Party is supposed to work, and to vote against Cori Bush. So you have the setup. It was what ended up flipping that vote. And so politicians get the message, and there has to be the message on the other side. It's quite likely. I was an uncommitted delegate to the Democratic National Convention representing the not Biden vote because we have to stop a genocide. And that might be the reason Kamala Harris lost the election, was because a lot of people stayed home disgusted, say, yeah, I don't like Trump, but I can't vote for genocidal people. But yeah, within the party, like the incentives for Democratic primaries right now, and the Cori Bush case was a big part. There's a lot of incentives to just look up and pretend this isn't happening and vote the right way and hope nobody sees it among people in Congress. And it's not just because they're bad. This is the actual moneyed incentives.
Okay, Barbara, why don't you cut one?
Michael, are there any congregations in St. Louis that are anti-Zion?
No, there's no congregations. There's a group.
Question was, were there, are there Jewish groups in congregations in St. Louis who are anti-Zionist?
That's a different question. There are anti-Zionist Jewish groups, Jewish Voice for Peace and Progressive Jews of St. Louis. There is a congregation Matovu, which is of the existing congregation the most likely to in the future come out that way, but it is very, very small in the city, and they have not proclaimed themselves anti-Zionist. But it's a very, very small. They don't even have a rabbi. There's 0 St. Louis rabbis who have come out as anti-Zionists. There's 0 rabbis who have opposed the words of Jeffrey Abraham, his actual genocidal language, which reflects the genocidal actions of the state of Israel. And I actually had an online exchange with Rabbi Bogard, who's like, we don't have as much power as you think we do, because I'm trying to pressure rabbis to come out. And I don't believe him. If a rabbi would come out and defy the Federation and say, what is happening is wrong, and I oppose the policies of the Federation, I say no money should go to Israel until these crimes stop. Like that, I think that would make a big difference. But 0 have done that. 0 have done that. And if someone's listening here and they have, please be public and tell me I'm wrong. I would like to be told I'm wrong. I am not trying to smear anybody. If this happens and you're hearing, tell me I'm wrong. Go out publicly, say it, proclaim it, and I will say thank you. But I've seen none of it. Nothing.
Zaki?
Bob, as you were speaking about how they walling off the cities, it took me back to Nazi Germany. Did they not do the same thing? I want you to speak on that in terms of.
Oh, in Poland?
Yeah,
Warsaw.
in Poland and Warsaw, yes. And also, just for the audience and my brother here speaking, I earned a spot in the Jewish Informer for supporting Cori Bush. And as well as for the audience, we do have a program that's called Conversation with Zaki Baruti. I just recently had Bob on, and he's still on my Facebook page being interviewed. And we have a YouTube station that's called UAPO News World, and you can still see his interview. So speak to that walled out compared to Nazi Germany.
Yeah, I mean, The only city that I know of is the famous Warsaw Ghetto, which, they've written books about it. A great book to read. It's an old book. It's called The Wall, but it describes what the people went through and, I mean, the horrors. And when I think back, about what this oppression reminds me of, it reminds me of the wall. It reminds me of what happened in the Warsaw Ghetto. I mean, yeah, I mean, they not only do they restrict movement, not only do these cities at times become prisons, but the army will go in there. According to the Oslo Accords, all security falls under the PA, correct?
In that area, in area A.
In Area A, yeah, but I mean, they have military incursions. They're even sending planes in now to places like Jenin and Tulkarm and bombing neighborhoods. They're mining. I think they mined how many houses? 20 somewhat, a whole neighborhood in the Jenin refugee camp. Almost the whole refugee camp blew up the houses, displaced 40,000 people. Yeah, yeah, I don't know what to say. It's bad. And yeah.
This something I forgot. I was going to say before it slipped my mind, that just the ramifications of the Cori Bush election. So if you look at, talked about the increased, almost exclusively white Jewish vote, that was increased in all the AIPAC money. The first congressional district is set to be majority Black district. You had the majority of Black voters in the district voted for Cori Bush, and we don't have Cori Bush because of the increased white turnout, because of AIPAC, and also because of this almost exclusively white Jewish campaign that was focused on richer white suburbs. So what we have is right. Well, there's the gerrymandering, right? That is back. It has to be understood that in 2022, Senator Steve Roberts understood to have having cut a deal with Republicans to change the boundaries in the first district to take out Maplewood, which is more progressive white area, and put in more of Creve Coeur, which is less progressive, also crucially more Jewish in its makeup. And so the gerrymandering did have something to do with it. But the ultimate effect of all this is we have lost one of the most important progressive fighters on all issues, not just this issues, in Congress. And also the will of the majority of Black voters in St. Louis was subverted. And not that white voters don't count and shouldn't have a voice, but it was subverted through money. And right. Corey will be back. Okay. Very good.
Call themselves Unity PAC.
Yes.
Just
Matt, are there any other questions?
just quick clarification, was the gerrymandering something to do with Cori Bush's laws?
What?
The follow-up question is,
Okay,
did gerrymandering have,
Matthew, why don't you speak into this?
the question is, did gerrymandering have something to do with Cori Bush's?
Yeah, it had a huge thing to do with Cori Bush. So the 2022 election, the 2022 boundaries that were made were between the first and second district of Congress. There was a huge debate, like all session long, because I followed this stuff in the Missouri legislature, a debate, especially in the Senate, about the Republicans were trying to agree and split a 7-1, which would have been really pushing it. Like, you cut the right lines, you have 7 Republicans, 1 Democrat in the state. They determined to have the 6-2, which we have now. You have Democrat in Kansas City, Democrat in St. Louis, and then 6 majority Republican districts. They cut a deal, and Steve Roberts was very much part of the deal, to change the borders, as we mentioned, take Maplewood out, put in more of Creve Coeur into the first district, which made the second district much less likely to be able to be won by a Democrat. So, but it was advantageous to Steve Roberts because he was running for Congress. Now he got crushed in 2022. But those changed lines helped the more serious run campaign and more well-funded campaign of Wesley Bell, who was able to get a boost from October 7th and people's willingness to forget October 6th and before and October 8th and after. But yes, yeah, the gerrymandering had a crucial part of it. It was not the only part, but it was a big part of it. The district that Corey won in 2020 was a easier terrain for her to win than her elections in 2022 and 2024.
Matt, any other, okay. No other questions. Tom Eglin and then Lauren.
So this question is for Michael again. I think, was it just a technical error that Cori Bush's campaign just, I mean, it seemed to me, I was in the campaign, it seemed to me it would have been smarter to press that home all the time, that this is APEC. If it was me, I'd be like saying APEC, 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 and they didn't seem to do that. It was like the elephant in the room and it didn't seem to be mentioned.
I'm not gonna relitigate whatever errors might have been made in Bush's campaign, but what I know is that if it wasn't for the $12 million and this whole Missouri votes, well, it could be the elephant, but like what I know is that regardless of the campaign, if it wasn't for all this money, she would have won. As far as tactical errors in the campaign, yeah, you can talk to people about it. I'm not gonna like comment on that because there's a lot of different opinions on best ways to run a campaign. But we do know that the internal polling before all the money came in mid-May of 2024 had her up 60-40. So if they would have had equal money, she would have won 60-40. That's all the indications were from that. I know I knocked doors after doors. I knocked probably 1,200 doors for Cori Bush, and people kept bringing up talking points from YouTube videos from mailers about her infrastructure bill vote, where they very, very misleading about why she did it. You could explain people 1 minute and they'd flip their votes, but you can't knock the doors of everybody who saw, I mean, $12 million, and it's actually a total of 20 million from all sources. 20 million in a district this size with it's much cheaper to advertise and do this stuff in St. Louis than New York. Like, it's, as far as value of dollars, probably the most money ever put in congressional campaign ever. The most money is actually Jamal Bowman, who was also defeated, but this was second. And given how much farther money goes in St. Louis, this is probably the most money ever put against somebody. And yes, there are definitely things you can talk about that the Corey's campaign could have done better. But even doing whatever it did, she would have won without all this money and these types of efforts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lauren, did you want to say something?
I just want to add to, bring it back to Palestine for a second. And the US,
Don't tell me.
The US vetoed a resolution today, I don't know if anybody saw that, against the ceasefire in Gaza. And all the other, I think all the other 14 members of the Security Council supported it. But yeah, nothing's changing there. And that's genocide.
Absolutely. Digger, did you have a question or comment?
Just a quick one. The Democrats, with that Cori Bush campaign, shoot themselves in the foot because, with that kind of money going into a congressional campaign, it sets this precedent now that you need $20 million to run for Congress. And that's why we're increasingly seeing billionaires and rich people who can finance their own campaign get into these positions of power. And so that is another, unfortunate side effect, or maybe it wasn't a side effect. Maybe this is exactly what they planned. maybe the Democrats and Republicans are in total collaboration on this. That's what I believe anyway.
Okay. Okay, any other questions, comments, thoughts, meditations? Okay, no, nothing from the chat.
No.
Okay, closing comment, Zaki.
Oh,
Are you still anti-colonialist? After thinking about it for 20 minutes.
okay. My only observation is twofold. One is genocide is taking place, and it's upon us to speak to the powers that be about it and do the best that we can to put an end to the genocide there, as well as what's happening right here in this country as it relates to police violence toward the Black community. Also, in terms of campaign expenditures, prior to Corey's campaign, there's no campaign law to limit dollars into campaigns, which needs to be done. So basically, you got elected officials that's reflective of the wealthy class, basically. And we have to deal with that as another issue.
Okay.
And when I said I was in the Jewish Informer, it wasn't on a friendly level. It was because I was supporting Corey Bush.
Jewish Insider?
Wait a minute, yeah, the Jewish Insider. I thought, okay, I'm having one of those moments. Yeah.
Now, there also is a political alternative of proportional representation, whereby all 8 Missouri candidates, all 8 congressional district positions would be run as a slate for each party, and you would get your candidates according to the proportion that the party received. Okay, Michael, you got closing comments? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, what I tell everybody, I mean, there's genocide. So don't be afraid if you're speaking out for human rights and against genocide. Don't be afraid of people calling you anti-Semitic. Just speak out against it. Don't denigrate the Jewish religion or Jews intrinsically, but like it is a terrible thing. All these groups claim to represent Jews. And so you say, well, the Jewish community is wrong. If they're the Jewish community, yes, it's wrong. There are times when the majority of a group of people, like if you spoke out against Jim Crow in the American South, that doesn't mean you're racist against white people, even if the majority of white people around were supporting it. There's nothing intrinsically about Jewish religion or Jewish ethnicity that makes this happen. But if the majority of Jews around you are supporting this, they are wrong. And don't be afraid to speak out against this. Don't let anybody bully you by calling you anti-Semitic for being a human being who wants to support other human beings' right to live. And also, the Jewish Insider is a terrible magazine. There is the Jewish Forward is a national Jewish media outlet that actually does some decent journalism. Yeah.
Steve Smart, do you still think history is important?
I live by history. I just want to thank Bob for his work.
It is quite a amount of dedication to go to Palestine time after time for 5 years to live with the people who are enduring this. Bob, you got some closing thoughts?
Just quickly, come to Palestine. You'll enjoy it. You'll love it. You'll meet some wonderful people, lifelong friends. Come when I'm there. And Mike, I love what you said. Don't defend yourself. Somebody calls you an anti-Semite, tell them they're a genocider or whatever. I mean, what they're doing, we don't need to be on the defensive. We shouldn't defend ourselves. I've had this argument with people, oh, you shouldn't say from the river to the sea. Why not? I mean, that's, a saying that the Jews started, from the river to the sea. Palestinian uses it, and it's genocide while we are committing genocide. It doesn't make any sense. Don't get defensive. Let them know what they're doing. Point out what's actually happening on the ground in Gaza. It's all over. I mean, it's all over social media and the news. And that's it. Thank you all for being here, and thank you guys for,
Okay, and for people who are on Zoom, we had a few technical difficulties here and there, but you know, we got a lot of bugs to work out, folks, and hope next time, you know.
Last at the highest count, 41.
Okay, so for 41 people on Zoom, 25 people here tonight. So we had a good program, and Bob, I'm usually don't worry too much about you know, my right to say something unless somebody's pointing a gun at me. And then I become very nervous about what I might say. And I think that means that those of us here have a lot more freedom to speak our minds than a lot of people in Palestine have to speak their minds. It just really does intimidate you when people have guns pointed at you. And I want to thank everybody for participating, whether you came in person or whether you Zoomed anywhere from Rhode Island, California. You know, we really love having people participate, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Don.
All right. I'm worried about somebody tripping in the next few minutes. I can't do anything about this. Okay.